Hey everyone, Jan here, codingwithjan.com. So last week I interviewed 3 different Shopify experts about their best advice on how to get started with freelancing. And honestly, I think the information we've collected actually turned out so good that I want to call this a free 1-hour training. You will also find some timestamps to navigate it. And this whole idea actually came about in partnership with our good friends at StoreTasker. If you don't know them, they have an amazing freelancing platform for Shopify developers. So if you're a developer and you want to make more money, go check them out. The link is right here and also in the description. And yeah, I think if you've been following this channel for a bit, then you know that I only recommend things I personally believe in. And now I'm super excited to present this to you. So let's take a look. Okay, perfect. Yeah, all right, Tyler. Then thanks so much for taking the time today. Would you like to introduce yourself a bit to the audience? Tell a bit about, what do you do for a living?
Yeah, sure. So I am I'm a freelance web developer based out of Springfield, Missouri, here in the U.S. And so I've been freelancing on the side for several years, basically. And really, my business didn't take off, didn't go anywhere until I started focusing on Shopify. Kind of stumbled into that, and now it's all I do. So it's great. It keeps me really busy. And so I only went full time last year. Really, so 2021, like I said, I'd been doing it, that side hustle kind of type thing, nights and weekends, and really wasn't anything extra other than, I always called it just, diaper money because I've got kids. And so it was like, it was paying for that kind of type stuff or whatever.
Okay.
But really once I started focusing on Shopify, that really started to take off. And so partway through the year in 2021, I went full-time freelance and made over 50K. Which
Nice.
was phenomenal for me. Yeah, thank you. And so after I got to that point, I just knew that I could just keep it going. And so I'm hoping to obviously, do more and improve the business there.
Nice, that sounds great. Yeah. Maybe one question here. What was it prior to Shopify? Other types of web development or maybe design or?
Yeah, no, I'm a second career dev. Before this, I was a social worker. So okay. Yeah, I have a master's degree in counseling psychology and went into social work, did that for about a decade, and was teaching myself web development on the side the whole time, just because I had kind of got introduced to it through, I think, how most people do, like, kind of help somebody else out with like a WordPress project because I was good at tech. And from there, just started learning as much as I could. So basically, so before then I was a social worker, and I kind of worked myself into a couple different jobs. I was a supervisor for a while and then transitioned to a smaller agency after I had kids, where I could do a job where I was part social worker, and then I also ran everything IT. So updating computers, maintaining, the SharePoint and all this fun stuff, the website. So that was a really great opportunity for me. And I still do some work with a couple nonprofits for that stuff. That's really my only non-Shopify work that I still maintain, just because I want to support those folks as much as possible.
And are you working alone or in a small team? Is this like sole proprietorship? Do you have an agency?
Yeah. So right now I'm just working by myself as a freelancer, though I've gotten to the point where there's just so much work in this space. And so I've gotten to the point a couple of times where I've had to ask for help. So, on parts of projects. And so I'm kind of starting to pick that up a little bit more. I'm not at the point where I do have like a team, right? It's just more so people I call when I say, hey, I'm overloaded, I need some help on this. But for the most part, it's just me. But I do hope maybe at some point it grows to a team. That I think that'd be great.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm Lawrence. I'm currently a freelance Shopify developer. I've been consulting in web dev or web technologies for the past 9 years. And I built my first website when I was 11 years old, which is, as of this weekend, I just turned 31. So about like maybe 19 years ago. So
happy birthday.
Thanks. Yeah. So, when I was a kid, I just got into making websites. This was back when you didn't even have laptops. So you would have to go somewhere. And in my case, I would hang out in the space where they had books, computers. You could just get everything for free, like free movies. They call these things libraries. I don't know if they still exist. nowadays, but they were nice. So, when I was there, I just hang out with friends. And one day I saw my friend had a website and I was like, whoa, that's an interesting website. What are you looking at? And she said, I made it myself. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know you can make your own websites. So that's pretty much like how I got into it. At the time I was thinking, man, the only people who made websites were like these really big companies. I didn't know just anybody could. And it just was like this very like liberating thought where you can just like get whatever you want to create out there into the world. So I was like, yeah, I'll learn how to make websites. I was already in the library, so I rented out a book. It was free. So I just like followed along the book. And, at the end of the book, I had made my first website. So that's pretty much like how I started off. And then like after college, I got back into it. While I was in college, I got involved with organizations and everybody knew that I could make websites. So that was a skill I had and I offered it. And it was kind of my reputation developed around that to the point where my networks would introduce me to people who had companies and those companies needed work. And that's kind of like how I got into it.
Ah, that's awesome. And are you currently working, because you mentioned freelancing, is that as a one-man show or do you have a small team or how does it work?
I'm primarily a independent consultant in my own little company. I occasionally do outsource work to trusted developers, but not too often. I like to make sure that anybody who works with me knows that I'm the person who's creating the work. So even on the cases where I do hire someone for a project, they're involved in the conversation in that case.
Okay, I see. Yeah, subcontracting in case you are lacking a certain expertise, or if, let's say, whether it be marketing or. But that's actually a good question. So what is your key expertise? What kind of services do you offer?
Oh, great question. So I love this one because in college I studied art and I can draw and paint. I can design websites, but I do not offer graphic design as a service, which is always really interesting because I could. But in my case, I decided that it's better to focus on one thing. And in that case, I decided to focus on software engineering. Oh, sorry, that's super technical. In this space, web dev. So primarily, I'm going to help you out if you have a store, if you have a company. I guess I can go back to the past 9 years. I've been doing Shopify specifically for the past, it's going on 5 years now. But to start off with, it was still that super focus of if you are a company, you have an issue with your website, you need to create a new website, I can help you with the development of it. And that's been the space that I'll operate in.
Okay, so that could involve store setups, migrations, theme customizations, whatever comes your way. Okay, nice.
Yep. My first large Shopify project was a site migration from WooCommerce to Shopify. And that involved all of that. But I would say like even today, I still specialize even further where I just want to write code. And that's not to say I can't do all those other things, but I just have a process in place where I can pretty much maximize my time that way.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. So I'm Steve. I'm a software engineer from Germany. And in the past, I've been working for big companies, large corporations, consultancies and such. And I then moved to the Silicon Valley to learn how to build companies and was working for an innovation hub there. And then I decided to basically run my own thing and I quit it. And a bit after that, I opened up Steve AJAX Consulting, which is now almost 4 years old. We have a team of 4 people focused in different areas. I'm the CEO, and I'm basically the project lead, the project management aspect of it. I also do hands-on project work, but I also do work with a team of specialists in different areas. Most of Shopify, we do front-end dev work. We have a really good designer on board. We do basically theme-related things, coding, custom builds, etc. Design, SEO, and email marketing, but also copywriting. And as I said, I'm with a team of 4 people. We can basically, be very broad in the services we offer, and it's basically all e-commerce related.
Okay, so it's an e-commerce front end full service agency if you want.
Yeah, more or less, it's like a 360-degree e-commerce service agency. We do work on different aspects. We do have a very, internal processes that allow us to work to be that flexible and do. But I would say, so personally speaking, my personal strength, even though I'm a software engineer, I would say it is crystal clear SEO and writing. It's a little weird though, because I studied software engineering in Germany, and I worked as a coder quite some time. But somehow, I know how to build things, I know how to code and everything. But SEO for some reason and copywriting, it just, I don't know. It is something that I learned on the fly, and yeah. But as I said, we're pretty hybrid. We do a lot of different things, and our clients, to maybe give you a little feeling about that one. So our clients range from small companies, I don't know, they do like 10, 15 orders a month, to big corporations that pull in up to 200 grand a month in turnover. So
okay, awesome.
It is really mixed in terms of like the services, and it's really mixed in terms of like the clients and their sizes.
Okay, awesome. I think this was great. And why don't we dive in heads first? As you know, today we want to talk a bit about freelancing and how to get started. So what would you say are the most important skills someone would need to learn when getting started? What do you think?
Yeah, so the most important skills, so freelancing in general, and then also like what will end up helping you like in the Shopify space too, is really just the basics of web development. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And I don't think you need to be like a JavaScript expert necessarily before you start diving in, really. Just being comfortable with a lot of the basics and some of the things that you can do. And then from there, you can get comfortable with Liquid, which there's a lot of really great resources out there. I think Liquid, I feel like it's relatively easy to pick up, particularly once you get used to HTML and CSS. Liquid feels like it flows pretty nice. There's some hiccups if you kind of maybe come from a different programming background with limitations with Liquid that people kind of complain about. But for the most part, there's a lot that you can do to help support merchants and stuff like that with just those things, really.
True. And maybe then also, if we're talking about Shopify development, how about Shopify as a platform? I think that would also be quite important, right?
Yeah. So, and that, really, again, like the Liquid being like a big deal from that. There's just so much you can do in like if you're doing like theme customizations, like I end up doing quite a bit. There's a lot that you can get away with just the basics and then some Liquid. It's really incredible what they've put together that makes it that easy for someone that has those pieces. And then obviously, eventually like getting into like if you want to do Shopify apps, I think Node.js is probably the way to go, which again is just continue to reinforce those JavaScript skills. It's just more of a kind of that space I'm at, like leveling up JavaScript so that way I can expand the services that I offer too.
Okay, nice. So HTML, CSS, JavaScript, web development fundamentals, then Liquid. And are you also helping people with, let's say, store setups and migrations, these kind of things? So where you would rather use the system itself?
Yeah. So migrations, a lot of times, most of the migrations I've handled a bunch from WooCommerce to Shopify primarily. And so there's a couple of tools just natively already within Shopify. They have the store importer app, but it's really not fantastic. Sorry if it's, I think it's more of a limitation on WordPress maybe, because at least stores that I've done where like there's been like over 10,000 SKUs or something like that. Servers timing out, and there's not a whole lot of redundancy built in there for when that happens. And so actually other apps, really, I know Matrixify is a huge one for that piece. So getting comfortable with a couple of big names in that space, just like, the syntax for how that stuff works really would be super helpful for people too, if you want to specialize in that.
Yes. Yeah, maybe I should reach out for some sponsorships here. Missed opportunity.
Yes. Yeah. Start name dropping. Yeah, absolutely. I bet they do it.
Yeah. So there's two aspects of this. There's a technical side, and then just like understanding the space. So the technical side, I'd say just learn the basics. If you learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript, that is something that is going to be useful pretty much for the rest of your life. I say this as somebody who learned it when I was 11, not even knowing it would be useful, and then just discovering, oh, by the way, people are willing to pay for this. So, but like once you understand the basics, then you can understand anything else. Like Shopify uses Liquid. Sure, that's a little more of server side, aspects in there, but still, you still understand how it interacts with HTML. And so like, just like understanding those basics is very helpful. But if you want to be, in this case, I don't know if we're talking specifically about Shopify or just freelancing in general, but sure, let's say you see that there's a certain space you want to work in, whether that is Shopify or if it's something else like WooCommerce or etc. Then you probably want to try to get your foot in the door with that tool. And that doesn't necessarily mean you have to learn the whole thing. It's possible that you could find somebody with a project that you could probably already help them with, even if it's just going to be something that exposes you to more of it. And then over time, you could offer more things. So I'd say like, what should you learn? The absolute basics. And then like on top of that, if it's Shopify, learn Liquid to the extent that it'll help you with a project for a client. And then learn more and more as you go. Like, that's probably like the fastest way about it. I don't say like, don't read a whole textbook, spend a whole year, and then maybe you could get your first client. So that's like the other side of it, right? Like the understanding the space. So if you're watching this, then, Yan talks a lot about Shopify. So if you're here, then you're already interested in Shopify. So you probably already understand that this is Shopify has been growing. It probably still is growing exponentially. But like when I first saw Shopify, it was a couple of years ago, and that was their third year that Shopify was tracking app metrics. So I could see like that exponential growth chart. And I was like, okay, this is a space that's growing. So since I already have one client in here, maybe I should explore this space some more. So for me, I actually didn't start with freelancing first. I created an app. I created a Shopify app. And that app was just based off an opportunity I saw. But what's interesting about that app is once a couple stores installed it, one of the store owners, I don't want to say the owner, but one of the main contacts, like the e-commerce manager, he connected me on Facebook, and then he added me to this Facebook group, which is like a very exclusive Shopify community. I think it's called like Shopify Plus Facebook group, where all the stores in there are, so like every store in there is basically companies that are paying at least $2,000 a month for hosting. So like they're qualified leads in my case, right? So like you can just like scroll that form all day and see what kind of issues everybody's having. And that's just like one example of like seeing like what skills you have that you could possibly like immediately offer to somebody. And I'm seeing a lot of times people on there just need things that can be solved with a developer. These are projects that can be fairly short term if you want them to be, and that's like a fast way to kind of like level up also. Like you can really just like sell yourself there and skill up. That's one way to do that. There's other ways too, like Shopify has its own forums. So yeah, like just like understanding the space is like another aspect of it. So you have the technical side and just like what's happening in the space.
That is a great question. It's also not as easy to answer, but I'm going to try my best here. So I would basically, so we're talking about someone who has zero experience at all in terms of like technical, how the internet works, etc. So that would be my starting point. So my starting point would be basic principles of the web. How does the web work? How does the internet work? How does the website work? And then from a technology standpoint, I would dive into mostly front-end stuff. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Liquid. Obviously, if you want to go into Shopify, JSON also a super important aspect now, especially now that everything is starting to be blogs and online store 2.0 being a big shift in the way we're building things. And of course, familiarize yourself with different JavaScript frameworks, different CSS frameworks. So why front-end in specific? So front-end work, at least that's my opinion, front-end work is easier to pull in as a consultant, and it's easier to I'm not saying all the time, but there are a lot of little, tweaks to do, push a button here, from the left side to the right side, change the alignment of a div. I don't know. So really not things that can crush the entire store of a client. And that might be easier to start with, also taking out the pressure of everything. And it will also, and why is that super important? Start small. This is super important because when it comes to like freelancing, it's not only about the technology aspect that you need to handle, it's also the interpersonal aspects and like the flow of, what it actually means to work as a freelancer or consultant. And that includes aspects like, communication skills in general, how to quote projects, how to scope them, how to talk difficult talks, right? So if a client asks you weird things, or if a client asks you stuff that is out of scope, how do you handle such situations? How do you tell them that things, or how do you if you do mistakes for at a project, how do you talk those talks, right? How do you spot red flag clients? How to sort good clients from bad clients? How to set the expectations right? All those things, they might be really overwhelming for someone who's starting out. And on top of that, you need to handle technology. So that's why I would I would start with basic fundamentals, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Liquid, really, because that is, I would say, a very easy starting point for someone who has never laid their hands on tech. And because in the beginning, to be completely honest, you're not going to build custom apps or things that are all too crazy. So start small, start with the front end stuff, and take it from there.
Build your way up. Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And okay, now we've covered a few technical things: HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Liquid, JSON, maybe also Shopify as a platform. And then we also have the soft factors, and we can definitely go in a bit more in a second. But in terms of the technical skills, one question we oftentimes get is, okay, when do you know enough to put yourself out? Because for a beginner, that might be hard to evaluate. Am I already an expert? Am I good enough to put myself out? Do you have any thoughts on that as well? So what would be your general advice?
So actually, as soon as possible, right? Because learning through the project is super, super crucial, right? I mean, there is no real point where someone is ready. I'm learning on the job every single day, and there's always something that I didn't know. And of course, I mean, you will need some sort of foundational basic skills, how the web works and stuff. But it is much more about confidence and, because be honest, not a single person knows it all. And that's why I would say try to get your hands on small projects as soon as possible, really accelerate your learning. And because what it all comes down to is our job is to take basic principles and build solutions for clients by applying those principles, right? So that's what we do. And that also means that every solution is unique to some extent. But if you can think of it technically, so if a client comes to me and asks me something, and I know in my head technically how to break it down and how to build it, you're already way past that point. You're already way too good to wait or to hold yourself back, right? So that is basically my advice. Start soon, start as soon as you can, and work your way up.
See, like, what's interesting is like I kind of like reverse engineer these things. So in my mind, I might want to see like what are the types of projects people are needing help with, and then I can pretty much see what skills would I need for those. So like there are some very like large projects out there. Like there are these full on like entire like platform migration projects that cover the whole gamut, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say go for those. If you feel like you need to be ready for those, then that takes a lot more knowledge than if you were to say, I'm ready for something simpler. So, let's say your background is web design and you have those skills already, and somebody just needs something very simple on their existing Shopify site, and Liquid now. That's a project that you could probably do. And, as you do that type of project, you would also continually learn. So that's probably like, I'd say like, try to find the simplest project you can take.
Could be a bug fix, a new section, something along those lines, I guess, right?
Yes. So to get specific, oftentimes stores they use these themes that they buy, and they don't always do everything that the stores need, especially as these stores grow. So one aspect could be a store just doesn't really like the way that their hero section does their text, or they need a custom section where instead of things being listed row by row, they want them to display as a carousel. So, like it could be just like one section of their store, right? So, or that, as you said, they could have a bug. Like, man, my shopping cart isn't opening when I click it anymore. Something happened. My customers can't. But like it's actually like it's like an urgent issue too.
True.
So, yeah, like there are very small projects you can find, and I'd say get your foot in the door. That's probably the fastest way to do it.
Okay, diving head first, learning on the fly, and then just continue to evolve your skills and then land more complex projects eventually.
Yes, and like you have to be able to assess yourself. Like even if you you don't know everything, but the question is, do you know what you need to know to do this project? Yes or no? And you should always be able to answer that, because you should always be able to give a customer a quote that is accurate. And there's no way you're going to give an accurate quote if you don't know what is involved with it. So
yeah, very true. Yeah, but I think also the ability to give good quotes improves over time a bit, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, well, I mean, for one, I know, and maybe it's a little bit cliche to say, you're not probably ever going to feel ready until you start doing it and you start seeing some traction and success there. But at least for me, a lot of that started with just getting a partner account, testing out your Shopify store. It's great that Shopify does that, where you can sign up for a partner account, run a couple of development stores, and get away with a lot, testing out a lot of things and creating some of your own kind of like portfolio products, really, to promote that you do know what you're talking about. Initially, I got started on Shopify because I did my own store. I read about drop shipping and thought that was how my wife and I were going to get rich and pay off our student loans, and then found out I don't really like a lot of the aspects of the marketing and that piece of things with the store. And so, but it did give me that introduction. So a lot of that, again, just started with just starting there. And then I actually helped out another local developer in a local web development group on a project that ended up being a paid project with a big Shopify Plus client. And
wow.
He had just reached out in the group for help. Yeah. And basically from there, I was able to help fix his problem. And he wrote me a really kind review afterwards. But after I kind of realized this was like for a really big client, this is a really big gig for his agency. And I realized I could do that. It was a solution that someone else was stuck with, and I was able to provide that. And so I began to see the value there, and really from there just started applying to jobs, from there.
Okay, I think that was great for the technical skills. And now we've already covered, or we've touched a bit on the soft skills or character traits one would need to have as well. But what are your thoughts in general? Do you have a small list of maybe the most important traits or the most important soft skills someone would need to have as a freelance developer?
I think it helps if you do have some experience in sales before. It's there's certain aspects of things where you might be in a conversation with a potential customer and you don't realize it because you just don't have the background to know that this person is really coming to you with a project, and it's something that you could probably like present in a way that they'd be willing to pay for. And that's a skill. It is. I think having mentors helps. If you've seen somebody do the thing you want to do, it makes it easier to do it as well. Like I think like the first couple web projects were all referrals. And luckily they all upfront told me, hey, can you give me a quote for this? Right. So then they already positioned it as this is something we are operating professionally, and that was helpful for me at the start
I
because
see. Yeah.
right. So I mean, I like even knowing that yes, it's great to have people come to you and see you as the person who can solve their problems, but being able to take what they see as value and actually extracting the value out of that is a skill. The best way to learn it, in my mind, is to learn it from somebody who knows it. That's the fastest way to do it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to soft skills, like that's such a big deal. And so I don't know, that's a hard thing. It's one of those things that I think if you don't have, you need to like work on, but things that are really like things that we think are basic. And so, showing up on time to calls, not showing up to a video call in your pajamas or, eating lunch or something. It's really funny, but I did that one time. I had to outsource for a gig, and this guy literally showed up just, sitting on the floor in front of his couch, eating his lunch
Okay.
while we were doing the call. And I was like, man, what are you doing? And into the call, found out he was kind of struggling to find clients and stuff. And I was like, well, I mean, this is kind of a good example here of probably what's happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, and realistically, just trying to talk to people like they're people. The biggest thing that I think that I do well in that piece, and being a second career dev is kind of lent to that, is I don't talk to people with a lot of jargon. I explain things to them as if they don't know what I'm talking about. If I get a sense of that being the case, if I know they're not a technical person, because if you make someone feel dumb, they're definitely not going to hire you. That's a really bad way to establish rapport, right? You've pretty much lost at that point. So that's the biggest thing, is just making sure I communicate, talk to them like a real person. Just if you were having a conversation with someone outside of work about work that you do, if you have to frame it that way. And again, just being honest with people, be transparent about what you do and don't know. It's okay to say you don't know. Nobody expects you to know everything.
Yes, I think that's awesome advice, especially in terms of the client communication, just showing genuine interest in their business, talking to them. What are your goals? Maybe, just basically let them explain what they do. Don't bombard them with technical language.
Find common ground as quickly as possible. That's if that's a soft skill trick that I have. It's just, find something you guys, have in common as quickly as possible, and then go from there.
I mean, I already covered it partially in the first two questions, but it's all about communicational skills and interpersonal. As I said, how to quote things, scope, and how to talk the talks. But one thing I didn't mention though was sales skills. Okay, so sales skills are super, super important because you're selling your knowledge and your service to someone. But the thing is, there's a ton of great devs and freelancers out there. They know more than you. They know more than me. So the thing is that, but why should a client choose you, right? And that is where your sales page comes in. You really need to communicate with them and sell a feeling, sell yourself, show them, okay, they can trust you. That's a relationship they're building here with someone. It's not just, tweaking a little button here and there. And it will also ultimately make you profit in the long run, because if you build relationships with clients, you're going to have continuous work, right? And that's why, in my opinion, you got to be confident and learn how to sell yourself. So that would be one of the most important skills.
Okay. Yeah. So you mentioned communication, which I think is immensely important, then sales skills. And is there anything you struggled with in particular? I can also share my personal insecurity. When I was starting, it was always asking for money, which was which I was really uncomfortable with. But yeah, do you have anything?
Of course. So I'm getting really good at it, but so my biggest flaw was scoping things. And I couldn't say no to new requirements. So let's say if a client and I could get along and it's like, hey, Steve, let's work for me. I need this done. And I would say, right, I'm going to make it work no matter what. Right. And then I would really not, I would do everything they say, even though let's say we have a scope, and they would constantly come to me and ask afterwards when new things change things here and there, and then like basically go to them and tell them, hey, you're not really paying for that, so you really need to, this is out of scope. We really need to kind of like find a solution for this. Like I need to quote you for that, or because it's my time. And also one more thing I was bad at is asking for money on due invoices. It's something I was really bad at. I felt like it was super unpolite, but on the other way, on the other hand, it is actually unpolite to have due invoices. So meaning if I would send an invoice to someone and they wouldn't pay in a month or so, I would kind of like, delay reaching out to them, asking them, hey, did you see my invoice and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, talking about money was a big one, but also probably the biggest thing is doing stuff like this. So, just putting yourself out there and, saying that you provide some sort of a service or you're an expert in X, Y, and Z. And that is something that is not within my comfort zone at all. So I'm very much so used to being like a behind the scenes person. When you're putting yourself out there as a freelancer, your face is your business pretty much. And so that part, having to, create content, like do video or just come into meetings and running the show, so to speak, in some of those instances to kind of help people find the solution that they're looking for. That's something that has definitely been a thing I've had to work on to get more and more out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. And how did you overcome that? Do you have any tips for beginners? Because that would also be interesting, I guess.
Yeah, part of it's just like putting in the reps and exposure, right? If you continue to think, I can't really do this, or I don't want to do this, or I'm worried about making a mistake and looking foolish. I think that fear of failure is going to always hold you back, right? And so it's just something you do have to get comfortable. You do have to, put the work in. So after, I did start to do that, starting to put the work in, I began to see the value that I bring to a lot of those conversations to merchants and stores and things like that. And that really helped me quite a bit, just get a lot more comfortable with it, because I realized, I can help people in these situations. So the other thing really too, I still don't like the term expert. I don't like it when, people, even saying that, even though it's part of like my intro with a lot of things, like I'm a Shopify expert. I hate calling myself an expert because I focused a lot on the things I didn't know. But my definition now of an expert really lends itself more to an expert is somebody who knows what they do know, but they also know what they don't know. And so that being a big part of it. And again, that comes back to that soft skills transparency of like, I can tell folks like basically what is outside of my skill set or not, I'm not able to do kind of type thing. And I think that has helped me quite a bit.
So I guess like one thing that I did struggle with was early on accepting the fact that if I want people to pay me, I have to make it as easy as possible for them to pay me. So, this might involve like creating an account with some accounting system that makes it possible for people to pay me with a credit card, even though that accounting system charges, like a fee on top. So, just like willing to accept the fact that there are costs of doing business, and that like you're going to have to accept those costs. There are costs that everybody in business has, and if you want to make your life difficult, tell people to mail you a check when they have a credit card in their hand.
All right, awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. I'm sure the audience will appreciate the transparency. And now that we've talked a bit about the skills, how to overcome your insecurities, why don't we touch a bit on landing your first paying client? How would you approach that? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, really my first paid client, I did some stuff where I tried to find clients locally for a while. And that never really went in there anywhere. I know some folks are really successful with like, cold email outreach and all that stuff. but it really didn't take off for me. It's probably just because I didn't know how to kind of position myself to, hey, this is the value that I can kind of bring to the table. So my first paid Shopify client actually came through Upwork. Yeah. So from there, that ended up working out really well. And again, like just once I saw that, like I could bring a lot of value in that space and how many jobs out there were for Shopify, I really just started focusing on just Shopify.
Okay, so if you have an optimized profile there, or at least a decent profile, then you would say it's definitely doable to get your first client there.
Yeah, for sure. And, I know a lot of people spend a lot of time doing things like writing proposals when they're reaching out to people and they're trying to get their first reviews. And I just took the strategy of just calling that out when I was first starting out, of saying, hey, I don't have a lot of reviews. So I'm going to, and I cut my rate. I'm going to do this for a relatively cheap rate, but you're going to get a much higher value than the hourly value that I'm charging for this project. And that ended up resonating really well with people until I got a handful of reviews, and then I was able to raise my rates.
Nice. Yeah, that's actually also what we recommend people in free mode. We also give them profile reviews and then some optimization strategies, show them how to do outreach, these kind of things. And do you still remember your first paying client? I mean, you've talked about the meetup thing, which was kind of volunteer work. But how about the first paying client?
Yeah, the first paid client was a little husband-wife team with a website called Blue House Boxes. And they basically went to these like local craft shows, and they'd get these really neat one-of-a-kind items at these places. And their idea was that they wanted to basically sell them online as like a bundle. So people would kind of create their own boxes of these unique items, right? And so the job itself was because they found this app. The app did exactly what they wanted in theory, but wasn't working necessarily. And so they needed help kind of setting it up, properly configuring products and collections to like make it work through this bundling app. And the app ended up being like pretty new to the App Store. And so, they were getting a lot of like really good correspondence from the app developer, but they didn't understand. It was somebody who was speaking like from a really technical place of like, this and this, kind of type thing. And so that was where I was able to step in and kind of, be the mediator, give good feedback that actually helped them improve the app as well, to where we got it working how they wanted it to.
Awesome. And do you still remember how much they paid? Or, I mean, if you're open to share that.
Yeah, no, well, it was like $30 an hour. And so a lot of that work wasn't like super labor intensive, right? It was just a little bit of communication here and there and making some optimizations on a handful of products. And so they had a whole bunch of other little things, as far as like theme customizations, a couple custom sections, stuff like that, relatively basic stuff. So I probably only made, I only made a couple $100 off of that. But it really was the launching point from there. Cause again, they wrote me a super kind review, and I think that really helped out.
Yeah, I think that's great. Getting some reviews, getting some traction, get the juices flowing. I think that's what people say.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, absolutely.
In this space, you are really trying to position yourself as the solution to somebody's problem. And the way you go about that isn't really just like trying to sell yourself everywhere you go. Like I have this service to offer. So, I honestly think what works is just taking yourself into a community where there are people who could be your customers, and then just being helpful there. So, if somebody just has a question you could answer when you look at something for 1 minute, go ahead and just like give them the answer, because then they'll see you as the expert, and they're going to have other questions they need answers. Those things might take more time. Those things might be projects, and they might come to you first. You could say, yeah, I can help you out with that. It's going to take me X amount of hours. It'll cost X amount of dollars. But, like the first thing is really just like you position yourself as someone they can both trust and someone that they see is an expert.
Okay, so you would say
they're not.
Is this tying into the idea of giving value upfront and then making stronger connections, just growing your personal network, potentially networking, and then getting clients that way?
Yeah, that's so like there's like different ways to go about it. You know, like if you see somebody that's like, hey, I'm looking for a developer, then yes, absolutely go and say, hey, I'm a developer. Here's my thing. Here are my list of services. But this, I think like this, what helps is more than just like participating in a community if you can find one, because you're going to find that a lot of these spaces aren't really that big. Like they're good. Like everybody does tend to like, you'll see a lot of the same faces in a lot of the same communities. So like, just make sure that you're not just trying to take and try to be helpful, because that's, like I've seen this so many times where somebody refers somebody else.
Okay, I
And
see.
like even those types of things, like when somebody's looking for help and you're not around, somebody might say, hey, Larry's a guy, you need to talk to him. And that's only going to happen if you're at the top of their mind as that person who has all these answers.
Okay, yeah, now we already heard the story of how you coded websites in the library, these ancient things that we talked about.
What are libraries?
Yeah, I only know JavaScript libraries nowadays. Yeah, anyways, do you still remember what was your first paid gig or your first paying client? Who was that, or what kind of project was it?
Yes. So the first paid gig would have been when I was in college. I had done a couple web type of projects, both for myself, and also for organizations that I was a member of. Those were not paid, but those developed my skills, and people would come to know me as a person who can do these things. So my first paid gig came from that kind of networking, where I think this would have been a professor actually. So
Nice.
like you never know. Like so a professor happened to be the chief operating officer of a company that, this is kind of like a software library. They have clients in the Fortune 500. Like I think they have 70% of the Fortune 500 as clients.
Okay.
And
Nice.
they just happens to be a professor on campus, and you would have never even known, because this is somebody who isn't really like truly a neuroscientist, if that makes any sense. So it's not what you'd expect.
Yeah.
But in any case, they approached me and was like, hey, Larry, would you like to help us out? We're trying to upgrade our website. Can you send us a quote for that? And so, I helped them out with that project. It was fairly straightforward. That quote, and I did not lowball this. I quoted $4,000 for that. I just went for it. Like, I do not think a lot of people quote that high for their first project.
No.
But, I just looked at it. I was like, yo, this is something that would probably take me around 80 hours. And I was like, it was going to be that type of project. So I figured it's worth that price. We already have that face-to-face interaction. They already want to work with me. Like, this is what I'm saying. It's so much easier, like offline, for those reasons. Like they've already decided that I'm the person that they would like to work with. So, so I gave my price. Honestly, if they would have said it was too high, I probably would have been willing to accept a lower price at the time. But luckily they accepted my first offer, and that's how that first one went.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah, I can remember my first project. I think it was 500 for a complete store setup. So yeah, definitely lowballed that a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. If it's your first project, don't worry about that price you're going to quote, because chances are it's probably lower than they're willing to pay.
Yeah, and it's also funny because back then I thought, oh man, 500, is that even acceptable? And then yeah, yeah, insecurity kicks in hard. Yeah.
There are many different options, right? We have on the internet, we have freelancing platforms like StoreTask, we have personal networks, we have Facebook groups and such. But so in my personal opinion, so freelancing platforms, for instance, they're a great starting point, but they're also a great lead gen tool in the long run. They're not only a starting point. There's so many great platforms to do lead generation, but the most important thing is like that you need to understand is you need to find the market for the problem that you're solving. So you solve a problem, which is I'm a store owner, right? and I'm trying to get something done. I have issues with my front end or with my design. I have issues with my SEO, email marketing, wherever. And then check out where people with that problem would go and search for help. And that is where you need to be. That's as easy as it gets, right? There could be a freelancing marketplace, just like I said. You can join different Facebook groups, like Shopify entrepreneurs or whatever. You can also, that's something that also helped me to basically understand who are the key players in that market, right? And then build strategic partnerships with those vendors and become partner with them, because they might end up like, giving you better support. They might end up, some affiliate cash might also be very interesting if you let's say sell themes or something, and so on and so forth. And those kind of like, partnerships, they will ultimately help you, because if you have a look, so there's in the Shopify universe, you can become a Shopify, I mean, not a Shopify expert per se, but you can find a lot of Shopify marketplaces. You can find StoreTasker, you can join the Facebook groups and such. And that's how I would do it. Like, I would basically first understand where a person with a problem is going, and then place myself there.
Okay,
That's how I do it.
Yeah, sounds like this is also coming a bit from the SEO strategies that you implement. Okay, so just to wrap it up, you would say networking, whether it be in groups, go to places that people search, where they search help, and then also strategic partnerships for the long run, maybe.
Exactly.
Okay, great. And yeah, maybe if I can ask that, another personal story here, do you still remember what your first paid client was, or your first project in general?
Yeah, of course. I printed my first invoice. Like the first invoice that I was sending to a client, I printed that, and it's in my wall at my wall. It's like
That's
my
awesome.
Hall of Fame. But yeah, of course. So my ever first freelancing gig was actually on Fiverr. And I placed myself there offering content SEO services. So what is content SEO? Basically like proofreading things, optimize them, put in keywords and so on. And I had a fixed end-to-end service saying that I will optimize a delivered set of blog posts, right? That was my first client. My first Shopify related work was also from Fiverr, by the way, which is kind of like a weirder story. So I got a client who was asking me to write SEO optimized blog posts. I think it was my second or third client at all. And then he asked me to write SEO optimized blog posts, which I did. And then he just randomly asked me if I also build online stores. And I was like, well, I'm a software engineer. How hard can it be? And I just said yes. And that's where I built my first Shopify online store. And that was in 2018. So
that was completely random.
It was random. I had nothing related to e-commerce. So there was nothing on my profile saying that I do Shopify. And I
didn't even know Shopify, what it was, or did you have some prior exposure?
No. That was like, okay, I need an online store. And I was like, I was literally going online on Google saying, best platforms for e-commerce stores.
That's
and then
nice.
I found Shopify. So that is basically the level of understanding that I had. I was just like, yes, I can build that for you. And I mean, I did it. It was a full online build. It was full store build. But yeah, that was my first Shopify client.
Okay, so I think by now we've already come a long way. We've been talking about the technical skills to get started, the soft skills, the insecurities, how to overcome them, how to find your first paying client. But what we haven't really talked about is the services one should start with. So do you have any favorite services that you can recommend? Could be development, could be copywriting, could be marketing. Yeah, what is it what you recommend to beginners?
Yeah, I mean, so for beginners, I mean, it really depends on maybe how far you are in your like web development journey, if that's really what you're leaning towards providing. So I was several years into web development, pretty confident in my skills as far as that piece goes, to where I jumped into just, custom theme development kind of type stuff. But maybe if you're earlier on, you might want to like lean yourself towards other complementary skills. that would also like improve that piece. So that's everything from SEO or conversion rate optimization is maybe some of those, and those might be a little bit more like if you've got a design background, conversion rate optimization probably helps because you've probably got some sense of UX. And so, you could probably look into that. And I think all of those skills will lend themselves to helping you down the road. But at least if you're relatively comfortable with your development skills, I'd say, theme development and stuff is a really big deal.
Mm-hmm. And when you say theme development, is that building themes from scratch, or is that theme customizations and store setups with premium themes, let's say?
Yeah, I would say customizations would probably be the easiest starting point rather than trying to build a theme from scratch, just because there's obviously a lot entailed with that. So yes, that's something that, I kind of like do on the side, more so for fun or to deepen my own understanding of things. And now that they've opened up the theme store again, right, that would be maybe a good way to transition into that eventually, particularly if you're not able to do this maybe full time. That could be a good way to do that. But I'd start with customizations and move from there.
Okay, so store setups, customizations, maybe migrations, we've touched on that. And yeah, conversion optimization is also pretty appealing because there's the performance-based component, maybe even performance-based pricing, which could be interesting. Yeah. But yeah, maybe not for a very beginner, maybe somewhere in the intermediate expert level. Yes.
Yeah, because for real true conversion rate optimization, you have to be comfortable with data, being able to look at that and understand how that works. Because there's obviously things that help with that in general, but really it's going to be specific to the client.
Yeah. And you also need clients with a substantial amount of revenue so that the conversion increase makes sense in a way. Yeah. Or justify the pricing. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
And do you also have some recommendations in terms of what types of services to focus on? Or is there anything a beginner should start with or should focus on in general?
Yeah, awesome. So what's cool about Shopify is because it's an e-commerce platform, people have all kinds of business needs. So even though I personally want to specialize on just development, there's all kinds of needs. There's marketing needs. There are people who need help with their advertisements, like maybe they need to connect their ads with Facebook, install the Facebook pixel. That's something I see happen a whole lot. There are people who need help with their email marketing as well, growing their email mailing lists. That's another thing that I see that also involves like installing apps like Klaviyo. That might be something you could help somebody with, like installing apps. Of course, there are people who need design. So they need to upgrade the designs of their stores. So if you have a design background, that's something you can help them with too. One thing that I personally recommend is like earlier, I recommended you try to see what's going on in the space. So that might involve being a member of certain communities, like even if it's a forum, just see the kinds of things people are talking about on there. And that also helps you get a good feel for the demand for certain things. I'd recommend that as well. And also like one thing that's really interesting is it's kind of like you have to pay attention to what's happening in the space. I'm seeing like there's a growing need for developers who can make websites more accessible for people who have impairments. Although most of us navigate websites with a mouse and a screen or our phones, and we tap with our eyes, with our hands, there are other people who navigate the web alternatively, and those people have money too, and they're willing to buy products. So stores want to make their websites accessible to them as well. And that's interesting because like that's something that is almost like an open space for developers in my mind. I just saw Apple post a job listing this weekend for a web accessibility developer for their app store. It's crazy. I'm looking at how much they're paying for these things. The jobs is listing for $100,000 to $200,000.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Salary, the requirement for it is they just want a bachelor's degree. What they really want is somebody who knows about like making websites accessible. There are certain standards here and there, you could learn them. But in any case, that's a growing need because in 2018, the first report was done. They analyzed the Alexa 100 and found that 60% of the Alexa 100, which are the 100 most accessed websites, are not accessible for people who need to use screen readers at all. So, like, wow, these are some of the biggest companies with the largest budgets, and they can't service millions of people. So, ever since 2018, this has become a growing topic of discussion. And that might be, if you do have a concern for, it's kind of like more of it's like a human rights thing. Like, if you do care more about that, and I think everybody should, that is also something that you as a newbie could get into. And you could offer those services. I don't think there are a lot of developers who offer those services, and you might be able to do it as a freelancer, as an employee at a company. If you get hired by Apple to do this, you can do anything the rest of your life. So that's, I'm saying, that's a space that I'm seeing that's opening up as well.
I would say do the things you like best, right? So choose one discipline and become excellent at it. Or in my case, hire someone that is, if you aren't. But almost everything is in demand if you're really exceptional or excellent at it. And end of story. If you're a good writer, you'll find clients. You'll find clients. If you're a good software engineer, you'll find clients too. So it really is to, like, what it comes down to is focus on the things you like best and become good at them. So when it comes to end-to-end services, though, there are little, different things to consider, right? So I would probably find something that is measurable, that will give you confidence when you do it, right? So it depends really on where you're at, if you're more a tech guy or more a SEO guy, marketing guy, copywriter. But really think about it. How can I, like, produce that service and make it measurable, what I just delivered?
Great input. And with that, we are already pretty much at the end. So I want to say thanks so much for taking the time today. And do you have any final words of encouragement or anything you want to share or say to someone who's just starting out?
Yeah, of course. I mean, so here's the thing. Like, in my story, I was like open like a book right now. I told you I had no clue what Shopify is, and I just said I can do it, and I did it, and now I'm listed at Store Tasker.
Team of 4.
I don't know. Yeah, I have a team of 4 people. We're pulling in a lot of money every month. We're working full time. So I have people that rely on me, right? So that is basically the level of commitment that I got into it. But the thing is that when you price your services, and that's not only, like, it's more general advice. When you price your services or price your hours, don't walk into a common trap that you are feared of losing a client just because your price is too high. Your price is not too high, it's just the wrong client. It might sound a little harsh, but here's the thing. If you lower the price, let's say you told them you're going to work for $20 an hour, and suddenly they said, that's a little bit too much. Can't you just lower your hourly rate? So my response would be, no, I can't. But what I can do, though, is lower the scope. I can make my time less worth, but I can work less for you if you don't have the budget for it. And then basically lower it to $10. That is not what you should do. You should not lower it to $10.
Okay.
Have a consistent hourly rate and stick with it. And if a client doesn't want to pay you your hourly rate, that's all right, because you don't have to undervalue your experience, your knowledge, and time just because someone does not have a feeling for the prices, right? And if someone is bugging you with this in the beginning, well, chances are that he will turn into a painful client 8 out of 10 times, right?
Yeah.
So keep an eye on that is just how it is, right? So, and what another advice would be, keep your eye on time management, because as I said, you only have 24 hours a day, and time management will be very crucial for your success in the long run, because the more time you can sell, the more money you will make ultimately.
No, I guess that, there's always, words of encouragement of basically just start doing the work, don't be too scared to that imposter syndrome. I know we touched on kind of type thing. You're never going to feel ready. And so I think doing things, kind of immersing yourself, or that's how I do it, listening to podcasts, watching YouTube, watching your channel, really getting to, hear what other people have to say that's in the space, so that you just get comfortable. It becomes kind of second nature to you. But realistically, you have to do something. That's the bit of encouragement. Don't be, too scared to put yourself out there. You never know until you're going to try. And I think you will find, like I said, there's the Shopify partner community is very, very supportive and encouraging. I think that's something when I first started, I was worried about, being a second career dev, kind of moving into business. You hear this idea that business is such a cutthroat mentality and everybody's trying to outdo each other. And there's so much competition. And I found the opposite really in this space. People are very encouraging and supportive. And I think that part of it has really helped my growth as well.
Yeah, no problem. So I know this topic that we're on right now is how to become a freelancer. But I think it helps to take a step back and see, this is a space. This space is about software engineering. It's a technical space. So it does help to see yourself as I'm this person with this set of skills. And there are all kinds of different people who are looking for these sets of skills. As it happens, software engineering is one of the things where you arguably do not even need a college degree to be a professional in the space, arguably. Honestly, once you have a couple years of experience, a lot of companies will hire you. You don't need a degree. So I'm not saying quit school, but I'm saying understand that this is something that is valuable, that people value and they're willing to pay for if you have the skills. That's kind of how I'd approach it. If I'm trying to get into the space, yeah, I could be a freelancer. That's one way to do it. I could also be an employee at a company. That's another way to do it. I could employ at an agency is another way to do it too. All those things are ways for you to make money while also developing your skills. So, if you do want to be a freelancer, you could very well decide, I want to be a freelancer long-term, but it might be easier for you to get a job and then transition into freelancing once you have more skills or you feel like you have more money saved up. So, I wouldn't say be so I must be a freelancer or else, I see it's a space you can navigate if you have the skills. So do what helps you develop the skills and reputation.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Ben, for taking the time today. I think this was a great input and would be awesome to see you here back on the channel one day soon.
Absolutely. It was nice to meet you, Jan. And yeah, dude, great channel. I love it. I scroll through all your videos. I'm definitely subscribing. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a great honor. Lots of fun. And yeah, hopefully we'll see each other soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. It was great to meet with you and sit down and chat.
Okay, I think that was as German as possible.
No, it's great. It's great.
But just making sure. Okay. You did it. All right, that's it for today, and I really hope you enjoyed this. I think the advice we got was fantastic, and also keep in mind to check out Store Tasker. I will just catch you in the next one. Have an amazing day. Bye.